Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he balanced 3 coffee orders in his hands while navigating through the glass doors of Sterling Industries. The towering corporate building always made him feel small, but today was different. Today, he carried something more valuable than the usual morning deliveries. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. Marcus had been delivering food and beverages to this building for 2 years, watching the same faces hurry past him without a second glance. He was invisible to them, just another service worker in a world of suits and briefcases. But Marcus saw everything. He noticed patterns, inefficiencies, and opportunities that the executives rushing past him missed entirely. The reception area buzzed with the usual morning energy. Sarah, the receptionist, smiled warmly at him. She was one of the few people who actually acknowledged his presence beyond a simple transaction. "Morning, Marcus. The usual suspects expecting their caffeine fix?" Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Tucked inside his delivery bag alongside the coffee orders was a folder containing months of observations and a detailed proposal that could revolutionize how Sterling Industries operated. He had spent countless evenings researching, writing, and refining his ideas after long days of deliveries. As he made his rounds, Marcus overheard fragments of conversations about declining productivity, missed deadlines, and communication breakdowns between departments. These weren't new problems, he had been observing them for months. The solution seemed obvious to him, but getting anyone to listen would be the real challenge. His last stop was the executive floor, where he delivered coffee to Janet Morrison, the chief operating officer. She was known throughout the building for her sharp tongue and no-nonsense attitude. Most employees feared her, and even seasoned executives chose their words carefully in her presence. Marcus knocked on her office door, his heart pounding. This was his moment. "Come in," came the crisp voice from inside. Janet Morrison sat behind her massive mahogany desk, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She didn't look up from her computer screen as Marcus entered with her usual morning latte. "Just put it on the side table," she said dismissively, her fingers continuing to dance across the keyboard. Marcus placed the coffee down but didn't leave. He cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, I hope you don't mind, but I have something I'd like to share with you." Janet's fingers paused. She slowly looked up, her piercing blue eyes meeting his for the first time in 2 years of deliveries. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he pressed on. "I've been observing some patterns in the company during my deliveries, and I believe I have some ideas that could help improve efficiency and productivity." A look of disbelief crossed Janet's face. She leaned back in her leather chair, studying him as if he were an unusual specimen under a microscope. "You're the delivery boy, aren't you? Marcus, I think." "Yes, ma'am." "Marcus Chen." Janet's expression shifted from disbelief to amusement, then to something closer to irritation. "Let me understand this correctly. You deliver food and coffee for a living, and you think you can solve problems that our highly paid executives and consultants are working on." Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out the folder. "I know it might seem unusual, but I've been in every department, every floor. I see how information flows or doesn't flow between teams. I notice bottlenecks and communication gaps that might not be visible from a management perspective." Janet's laugh was cold and sharp. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Sterling Industries employs some of the brightest minds in the business. We have teams of analysts, strategists, and consultants working on operational efficiency. What makes you think a delivery person could see something they've missed?" The word stung, but Marcus had expected this reaction. Sometimes an outside perspective can reveal what's hidden in plain sight. "I'm not asking for anything except 5 minutes to explain what I've observed." Janet stood up and walked around her desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was taller than Marcus had expected, and her presence was intimidating. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to give you some free advice. Stay in your lane. Focus on delivering orders correctly and on time. Leave the business strategy to people who actually understand how companies work." She returned to her desk and picked up her phone. "Now I have important calls to make. Please close the door on your way out." Marcus stood there for a moment, holding his folder. 2 years of work, months of careful observation and analysis, dismissed without even a glance. But something in Janet's reaction told him she was more rattled by his approach than she was letting on. As he left her office, Marcus noticed Janet watching him through her glass wall. There was something in her expression, Not curiosity exactly, but a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. The rest of his delivery route felt mechanical. Marcus's mind kept replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, every gesture. He had been prepared for rejection, but the complete dismissal still hurt more than he had anticipated. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in the small park across from Sterling Industries, staring up at the building that housed his rejected dreams. Other delivery workers shared the same bench, eating sandwiches and complaining about difficult customers. But Marcus wasn't listening to their conversations. He was formulating his next move. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "How did it go with your big presentation?" Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Still working on it." He wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The problems he had identified were real and his solutions were solid. If Janet Morrison wouldn't listen, perhaps there was another way to get his ideas heard. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park, Marcus made a decision. He would find another approach, another angle. He had spent too much time observing, analyzing, and preparing to let one rejection stop him. What Janet Morrison didn't know was that Marcus Chen had secrets of his own. His background wasn't what anyone at Sterling Industries assumed, and his qualifications went far beyond his current job title. The truth about who he really was might shake the very foundations of the company, if he ever chose to reveal it. But for now, he would continue to be the invisible delivery boy, watching and waiting for the right moment to prove that sometimes the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected sources. 3 days had passed since Janet Morrison dismissed Marcus's proposal, but she couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. Something about the delivery boy's confidence bothered her. No ordinary food delivery person would have the audacity to approach a C-level executive with business advice. The incident was so unusual that she found herself watching for him during his daily rounds. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his deliveries with renewed purpose. If direct approach had failed, he would try a different strategy. He began leaving subtle notes with some of his deliveries, not to executives, but to mid-level managers who seemed more approachable. These notes contained small observations about workflow improvements or suggestions for better interdepartmental communication. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. David Kim, a project manager in the marketing department, had received one of Marcus's notes about streamlining the approval process for promotional materials. Instead of dismissing it, David implemented the suggestion and saw immediate results. A campaign that typically took 2 weeks to approve was completed in 5 days. Curious about the source of this valuable insight, David asked around until he tracked down Marcus. He found him in the building's loading dock during his afternoon break. "You're the guy who left the note about the approval workflow, aren't you?" David asked. Marcus looked up from his sandwich, surprised to be approached by someone in a business suit. "That depends." "Did it help?" David laughed. "Help? It saved us over a week on our latest campaign. Where did you learn about project management optimization?" For a moment, Marcus considered revealing more about his background, but decided to keep his cards close to his chest. "I just pay attention to patterns. You'd be surprised what you can see when you're invisible to most people." David sat down on a nearby crate. "Well, your invisibility is our gain. Do you have any other insights about our department?" Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus shared several observations about communication bottlenecks between marketing and sales. David took notes eagerly, recognizing the value in Marcus's outsider perspective. Word about the mysterious delivery consultant began to spread quietly through the middle management ranks. Marcus found himself having brief conversations with managers during his deliveries, offering insights that consistently proved valuable. He was careful to keep these interactions informal and discreet, knowing that official attention might shut down his underground consulting operation. But Janet Morrison was beginning to notice changes in the building's atmosphere. Departments that had been struggling were suddenly hitting targets. Communication between teams improved noticeably. Productivity metrics showed steady upward trends. During executive meetings, middle managers presented innovative solutions to long-standing problems with surprising confidence. "Something's different around here," Janet mentioned to her assistant during their weekly briefing. "Projects are moving faster, and I'm seeing improvements I can't explain." Her assistant, Linda, had heard whispers about a helpful delivery person but wasn't sure if she should mention it. There have been rumors about someone providing informal advice to various departments, she said carefully. Janet's eyes narrowed. What kind of advice? From whom? I'm not sure about the details, but several managers have mentioned getting helpful suggestions from someone who understands the business very well. The pieces began clicking together in Janet's mind. The confident delivery boy, the mysterious improvements, the timing of everything. She decided to conduct her own investigation. The next morning, Janet did something she had never done in her 15 years at Sterling Industries. She took a walk through different floors during delivery time. She disguised her reconnaissance as impromptu check-ins with various department heads, but her real purpose was to observe Marcus Chen in action. What she witnessed surprised her. In the accounting department, she saw Marcus engaging in a brief but intense conversation with the controller about invoice processing procedures. On the sales floor, he was sketching out something on a napkin for the regional sales director. In each case, the employees were listening intently and taking notes. This wasn't the behavior of a simple delivery person. Marcus moved through the building with the confidence of someone who understood business operations at a sophisticated level. His questions were insightful, his suggestions specific and actionable. Most surprising of all, senior employees were treating him as a peer rather than service staff. Janet's curiosity reached a tipping point when she overheard the head of human resources telling her colleague, "That delivery consultant's idea about restructuring our interview process has cut our hiring time in half. Whoever he is, he knows more about organizational efficiency than most of the consultants we pay 6 figures." That afternoon, Janet positioned herself in the lobby, pretending to review documents while watching for Marcus's arrival. When he entered with the day's coffee orders, she approached him directly. "Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you." Marcus looked up, unsurprised to see her. If anything, he seemed to have been expecting this confrontation. "Of course, Ms. Morrison. Should I finish my deliveries first?" "No, my office, now." The elevator ride was silent, but Janet could feel a shift in the dynamic between them. Marcus no longer seemed like the nervous delivery boy who had approached her 3 days earlier. There was a calm confidence about him that she found both intriguing and irritating. Once in her office, Janet closed the door and faced him directly. "I want to know who you really are and what you're doing in my building." Marcus set down his delivery bag and smiled slightly. "I'm exactly who I said I was, Marcus Chen, delivery person. But I'm also someone who pays attention and likes to help solve problems." "Don't play games with me," Janet said sharply. "I've been watching you. The way you talk to department heads, the insights you're providing, the improvements happening throughout the company. This isn't the work of someone who just delivers food." Marcus remained calm under her scrutiny. "You're right. I do have experience beyond my current job. But 3 days ago you made it clear that my background didn't matter because of what I do for a living." Janet felt a flash of defensiveness. Anyone can claim to have ideas. Results matter more than credentials. "Exactly," Marcus replied. "And the results speak for themselves, don't they? Productivity is up across multiple departments. Projects are completing ahead of schedule. Employee satisfaction scores are improving, all without spending a penny on expensive consultants." The truth in his words stung. Janet had been taking credit for these improvements in her reports to the CEO, attributing them to her leadership initiatives. Now she was faced with the uncomfortable reality that the improvements were actually coming from someone she had dismissed entirely. "What do you want?" she asked finally. Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I want to continue helping this company succeed. Whether that's as Marcus, the delivery guy who offers informal advice, or in some other capacity, doesn't matter to me. What matters is that good ideas get implemented regardless of where they come from." For the first time in years, Janet Morrison found herself at a loss for words. The person standing in front of her was clearly more than he appeared to be, and she was beginning to suspect that underestimating him might be the biggest mistake of her career. Janet Morrison spent a sleepless night thinking about her conversation with Marcus Chen. By morning, she had made a decision that went against every instinct she had developed over her corporate career. She was going to give the delivery boy a real chance to prove himself. The next morning, Janet called her assistant Linda into her office. "I need you to arrange a meeting with Marcus Chen, the delivery person. Set it up for this afternoon in conference room B." Linda raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question her boss's unusual requests. Should I mention what the meeting is about? Tell him I want to see his proposal. The one I refused to look at last week. Word of the scheduled meeting spread quickly through the building's informal communication network. By lunchtime, several department heads had heard whispers that something unusual was happening between the COO and the mysterious delivery consultant who had been helping their teams. Marcus arrived at conference room B precisely on time, carrying the same folder he had brought to Janet's office days earlier. This time, however, the setting was different. Janet had arranged for the meeting to take place in one of the company's formal presentation rooms, complete with a projector and whiteboard. "Please have a seat," Janet said, gesturing to the chair opposite her at the polished conference table. "I owe you an apology for my reaction the other day. I've been watching the improvements happening throughout the company, and I understand they're connected to your informal consulting." Marcus opened his folder and spread out several documents. "No apology necessary. I understand why you reacted the way you did. My approach was unconventional." Janet leaned forward, studying the papers. What she saw impressed her immediately. The documents were professionally prepared, with detailed analysis supporting data and clear implementation strategies. This wasn't the work of someone playing at business consulting. It was the product of serious expertise. "Talk me through your main recommendations," Janet said. Marcus stood and moved to the whiteboard. "The core issue I've identified is information silos. Each department operates efficiently within its own boundaries, but communication between departments creates bottlenecks that slow everything down." He began drawing a diagram of the company's organizational structure. For example, when marketing creates a campaign, it goes through legal, finance, sales, and production. Each handoff point creates delays because each department uses different systems, different terminology, and different approval processes. Janet nodded. This was a problem she had been aware of but hadn't found an effective solution for. Marcus continued. "My proposal involves creating cross-functional communication protocols and establishing liaison roles that can translate between departments. It's not about changing the structure, it's about improving the connections." For the next hour, Marcus outlined detailed strategies for improving workflow, reducing redundancies, and enhancing communication. Each recommendation was backed by specific examples he had observed during his deliveries. Janet found herself taking notes and asking increasingly sophisticated questions. "Your analysis is thorough," Janet admitted. "But implementing these changes would require buy-in from multiple department heads. Some of these people have been doing things the same way for years." Marcus smiled. "That's actually the easiest part. I've already been testing small versions of these changes with various managers. David Kim in marketing, Susan Walsh in accounting, Robert Torres in sales. They've all seen positive results from implementing pieces of this framework." Janet was stunned. "You've been running pilot programs without official authorization? I've been offering suggestions that people were free to ignore. The fact that they implemented them and saw improvements suggests the ideas have merit." At that moment, Janet's phone buzzed with a text from the CEO. "Quarterly numbers look outstanding. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." She stared at the message, realizing that Marcus's unofficial consulting had been directly contributing to the company's improved performance. The quarterly report she had prepared for the board meeting next week would show the best results Sterling Industries had seen in 3 years. "Mr. Chen," she said slowly, "I need to ask you something directly. What is your actual background? This level of business analysis requires education and experience that goes well beyond delivery work." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. "I have an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of experience as a management consultant with McKinsey & Company. Janet's pen clattered to the table. "What?" "Before this job, I was making 6 figures helping Fortune 500 companies solve exactly the kinds of problems Sterling Industries is facing. I left that career for personal reasons and took the delivery job as a temporary solution while I figured out my next move." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Marcus gathered his papers calmly. "Because you made it clear that my current job title was more important to you than my ideas. I wanted to prove that good insights have value regardless of who provides them." The room fell silent. Janet realized she had been caught in her own prejudice. She had dismissed valuable expertise because it came from someone in a service role, nearly costing the company significant improvements in efficiency and profitability. "So the question now," Marcus continued, is whether you want to continue benefiting from these improvements or if you prefer to maintain the status quo because you're uncomfortable with where the ideas are coming from. Janet stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. In her entire career, she had never encountered a situation quite like this. She had built her reputation on being tough, decisive, and uncompromising, but she had also built it on recognizing talent and delivering results. When she turned back to Marcus, her expression had changed. What would it take to implement your full proposal? Official support from executive leadership and the authority to work directly with department heads to coordinate the changes. And what role would you want in the implementation? Marcus considered the question carefully. I don't need a fancy title or corner office. I just want to see good ideas put into practice. Whether I do that as a consultant, an interim manager, or continue as a delivery person who offers advice, that's less important than making sure the company succeeds. Janet made her decision. I'm going to present your proposal to the executive team. If they approve it, I want you to lead the implementation. But I need to know, are you planning to stay in the delivery business or are you open to taking on a more official role here? That depends, Marcus replied. Are you offering me a position based on my ideas? Or are you trying to hide the fact that your biggest operational improvements came from someone you initially dismissed? The question hung in the air between them. Janet realized that Marcus Chen was not only more qualified than she had assumed, he was also much smarter about corporate politics than she had given him credit, for her next decision would determine not only Marcus's future at the company, but also how Sterling Industries would handle innovation and talent recognition going forward. Janet Morrison's conscience wrestled with her ambition throughout the night. She had two choices: present Marcus's proposal as her own discovery and take credit for the improvements, or admit to the executive team that their recent success came from an unexpected source she had initially rejected. The next morning brought the monthly executive committee meeting. Janet sat in the boardroom's leather chair, Marcus's proposal folder hidden in her briefcase, while CEO Richard Sterling discussed the company's impressive quarterly performance. Our efficiency ratings are at an all-time high, Richard announced to the gathered executives. Productivity is up 18%. Project completion times have improved by 23%, and interdepartmental communication scores show remarkable improvement. Janet, your operational leadership seems to be paying dividends. The other executives nodded approvingly in Janet's direction. Vice President of Sales Tom Bradley added, whatever management strategies you've implemented, they're working. My team has never had smoother coordination with marketing and production. Janet felt the weight of the moment. This was her opportunity to claim credit and solidify her position within the company. Instead, she surprised herself by standing up. Actually, I need to make a correction, she said. These improvements didn't come from my management initiatives. They came from someone else entirely. The room fell silent. Richard Sterling's eyebrows raised in surprise. Janet opened her briefcase and removed Marcus's proposal. For the past several weeks, we've had an unofficial consultant working throughout the company. His insights and recommendations have been responsible for virtually all of our recent operational improvements. An unofficial consultant? Asked CFO Margaret Webb. We didn't approve any consulting contracts. That's because he's been working for free, Janet replied. And his day job is delivering our coffee and lunch orders. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Tom Bradley laughed out loud. You're telling us that a delivery boy has been running management consulting for Sterling Industries? I'm telling you that someone with an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of McKinsey experience has been identifying and solving our operational problems while delivering sandwiches. Janet responded firmly. The laughter stopped. Richard Sterling leaned forward in his chair. Explain. For the next 20 minutes, Janet presented Marcus's analysis and recommendations. She detailed the specific improvements each department had experienced and showed the direct correlation between his suggestions and their improved performance metrics. The executives listened with growing amazement as the scope and sophistication of the work became clear. This is remarkable analysis, Margaret Webb admitted, studying the financial projections. If these recommendations are fully implemented, we could see profit margins increase by 15 to 20% within 6 months. Richard Sterling stood and walked to the window. So let me understand this correctly. We have someone with elite consulting credentials working in our building, solving our problems, and we're paying him minimum wage to deliver food. That's correct, Janet confirmed. And I initially dismissed him entirely when he tried to present these ideas to me directly. The CEO turned back to face the room. Where is Mr. Chen now? Janet checked her watch. Probably making his afternoon delivery rounds. Get him up here. Now. Within 15 minutes, Marcus Chen stood in the same boardroom where Sterling Industries' most important decisions were made. He wore his usual delivery uniform, khaki pants, polo shirt with the food service company logo, and comfortable walking shoes. The contrast with the executive's expensive suits was stark, but Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence. Mr. Chen, Richard Sterling began, I've just reviewed your operational analysis of our company. It's exceptional work. I need to understand why someone with your qualifications is delivering our lunch orders. Marcus had prepared for this question. I left management consulting for personal reasons and needed time to reassess my career direction. The delivery job provided steady income while giving me space to think about what I wanted to do next. And what did you conclude? That good business is good business, regardless of the setting. Sterling Industries has tremendous potential, but like many companies, you have efficiency gaps that prevent you from reaching that potential. I found it professionally satisfying to help address those gaps even informally. Tom Bradley, who had been skeptical throughout the meeting, asked, Why didn't you just apply for a consulting position here instead of this elaborate deception? Marcus met his gaze steadily. It wasn't deception. I never claimed to be anything other than what I am, someone who delivers food and notices patterns. The fact that I also have formal business training is relevant, but it shouldn't be the only factor in evaluating whether ideas have merit. Margaret Webb nodded thoughtfully. You've essentially been providing free consulting services to prove a point about recognizing value, regardless of its source. That's one way to look at it, Marcus agreed. Another way is that I saw problems I could help solve, and helping felt more productive than staying silent. Richard Sterling had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke directly to Marcus. Your work has contributed to our best quarterly performance in 3 years. What would you recommend as our next steps? Marcus opened a second folder he had brought with him. I've identified 3 additional areas where strategic improvements could yield significant results. However, implementing these changes would require full executive support and dedicated resources. For the next hour, Marcus presented advanced strategies for supply chain optimization, customer relationship management enhancement, and strategic partnerships development. His presentation was polished, comprehensive, and demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that companies typically paid premium consulting firms millions to provide. When he finished, the room was quiet. Finally, Richard Sterling spoke. Mr. Chen, I'm going to make you an offer. I want you to join Sterling Industries as Director of Strategic Operations, reporting directly to me. Your salary would be $200,000 annually, plus performance bonuses tied to the improvements you implement. You would have a dedicated team and full authority to execute the recommendations you've outlined. The offer was generous, more than Marcus had earned even at McKinsey, but his response surprised everyone in the room. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sterling, but I need to decline the position as you've described it. Janet Morrison felt her heart sink. After everything that had happened, was Marcus going to reject the opportunity? However, Marcus continued, I would be interested in a different arrangement. I'd like to propose a 6-month consulting contract to implement these improvements, with the option to discuss permanent employment after we've proven the strategies work in practice. Richard Sterling smiled for the first time since the meeting began. You want to maintain your independence while proving your worth. I want to ensure that any long-term commitment is based on demonstrated results rather than impressive presentations, Marcus replied. Too many consulting relationships fail because expectations don't match reality. The CEO looked around the room at his executive team. Each of them nodded their agreement. Mr. Chen, you have a deal. Janet will work out the contract details with you. And Mr. Chen? Yes, sir? Tomorrow morning, I want you to present your findings to our board of directors. They need to understand how we've been leaving value on the table by not recognizing talent in unexpected places. As the meeting concluded and the executives filed out, Janet remained behind with Marcus. That took courage, she said. Admitting the truth could have cost me my reputation. Marcus gathered his papers. You could have taken credit for everything and no one would have known the difference. The fact that you didn't tells me that Sterling Industries has the kind of leadership that can actually implement meaningful change. For Janet Morrison, this was the moment when she realized that the delivery boy who had knocked on her office door had taught her something far more valuable than operational efficiency. He had shown her the difference between being a manager and being a leader. The Sterling Industries board meeting the following morning was unlike any in the company's 40-year history. 12 distinguished board members, including former CEOs, investment partners, and industry experts, sat around the mahogany conference table waiting to hear from a consultant they assumed would be another expensive hire from a prestigious firm. When Marcus Chen walked into the boardroom wearing a simple navy suit instead of his usual delivery uniform, several board members exchanged puzzled glances. Richard Sterling had deliberately kept Marcus's background story for the presentation itself, knowing the revelation would have maximum impact when delivered in person. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, "I want to introduce Marcus Chen, who has been responsible for our exceptional quarterly performance improvements. Before he presents his strategic analysis, I think you should know how we discovered his talents." Richard then told the story of how Sterling Industries had been receiving world-class consulting services from someone they had been paying to deliver sandwiches. The board members' reactions ranged from amusement to amazement, to professional curiosity about how such a situation had occurred. Board member Elizabeth Hartwell, former CEO of a Fortune 100 company, leaned forward with interest. "Mr. Chen, this is certainly an unconventional introduction to the boardroom. Please help us understand how you identified opportunities that our internal teams had missed." Marcus activated the presentation screen and began with a simple question. "How many of you have noticed that your most innovative ideas come from unexpected sources, rather than formal brainstorming sessions?" Several hands raised around the table. "That's because innovation often requires an outsider's perspective," Marcus continued. "When you're inside a system, you adapt to its inefficiencies. When you're outside, those inefficiencies are obvious." He clicked to his first slide, which showed Sterling Industries' organizational chart. "For 2 years, I moved through every department in this building. I saw how decisions were made, how information traveled between teams, and where bottlenecks occurred. Most importantly, I saw the gap between the company's potential and its actual performance." The next 30 minutes represented some of the most insightful business analysis the board had ever witnessed. Marcus presented not just problems and solutions, but a comprehensive understanding of Sterling Industries' culture, market position, and competitive advantages. His recommendations were specific, actionable, and backed by detailed financial projections. Board member Jonathan Rivers, a venture capitalist with 40 years of experience, interrupted the presentation. "Mr. Chen, I've seen thousands of business proposals. Your analysis demonstrates the kind of deep institutional knowledge that usually takes consultants months to develop. How did you acquire this understanding so quickly?" "I had an advantage that most consultants don't have," Marcus replied. "I was invisible. People spoke freely around me because they didn't see me as someone who mattered to their careers or corporate politics. I heard honest conversations about what worked, what didn't work, and what employees wished they could change." Elizabeth Hartwell nodded approvingly. "That's remarkably astute. You essentially conducted anthropological research on our corporate culture." Marcus advanced to his final slides, which outlined a comprehensive transformation plan. "My recommendations fall into 3 phases. Phase 1 involves immediate operational improvements that can be implemented within 60 days with minimal cost and maximum impact. Phase 2 introduces structural changes to improve long-term efficiency. Phase 3 positions Sterling Industries for strategic expansion into new markets." When he finished, the boardroom was silent for several moments. Finally, Board Chairman William Sterling, Richard's father and the company's founder, spoke for the first time. "In 40 years of building this company, I've never encountered anything quite like this," the elderly man said. "Mr. Chen, you've essentially provided us with a masterclass in recognizing untapped potential, both in our operations and in our people." Richard Sterling seized the moment. "The board needs to approve Marcus's consulting contract and the resource allocation for implementing his recommendations. Based on his projections, the return on investment should exceed 300% within the first year." Board member Patricia Kim, who served as the audit committee chair, raised a practical concern. Mr. Chen, you've identified significant opportunities, but implementation will require changing established processes and overcoming institutional resistance. How do you plan to manage that challenge? This was the question Marcus had been hoping for. Change management is actually easier when improvements come from within the organization, rather than from external consultants. The managers who have already implemented pieces of my recommendations have become advocates for the broader changes. They've seen the results firsthand and can speak to their peers about the benefits. He clicked to a slide showing testimonials from department heads who had worked with him informally. David Kim from marketing, Susan Walsh from accounting, Robert Torres from sales. Each had provided statements about how Marcus's suggestions had improved their team's performance. Jonathan Rivers was impressed. You've built grassroots support for organizational change. That's remarkably sophisticated change management strategy. It's also authentic, Marcus added. These improvements aren't being imposed from above. They're emerging from the teams themselves based on demonstrated success. William Sterling looked around the table at his fellow board members. I move to approve Mr. Chen's consulting, contract and authorize the resources he's requested for implementation. Seconded, said Elizabeth Hartwell immediately. The vote was unanimous. After the board meeting concluded and most members had left, William Sterling asked Marcus to remain behind with Richard and Janet. Mr. Chen, the company founder said, I started Sterling Industries with the belief that good ideas should be recognized regardless of where they come from. Over the years, I've watched us become more corporate, more hierarchical, more closed to outside perspectives. Your story reminds me why we need to stay connected to that original vision. He paused, studying Marcus thoughtfully. I have one question that hasn't been asked. Why did you really take the delivery job? With your credentials, you could have walked into any consulting firm or corporate position. Marcus considered his answer carefully. I was burned out from the consulting world. Too many projects focused on cutting costs rather than creating value. Too many recommendations that looked good on paper but ignored the human element of business. I needed to remember why I was drawn to business strategy in the first place. And what did you remember? That the best business improvements come from understanding how people actually work, not just how organizational charts say they should work. Delivering food gave me access to those real conversations and genuine relationships that you can't get from conference rooms and PowerPoint presentations. William Sterling smiled. 6 months after that pivotal board meeting, Sterling Industries had transformed into a model of operational excellence. Marcus's consulting contract had evolved into something neither he nor the executives had originally envisioned. A complete reimagining of how the company identified and developed talent. The results spoke volumes. Quarterly profits had increased by 32%. Employee satisfaction scores reached all-time highs, and Sterling Industries was featured on the cover of Business Week as the company that listens. But the most significant changes weren't visible in financial reports, they were evident in the culture itself. Marcus had established what he called perspective programs. Throughout the organization, maintenance staff were invited to contribute ideas about facility efficiency. Customer service representatives provided input on product development. Even the security guards shared insights about building operations that saved the company thousands of dollars monthly. The delivery boy, who had once been invisible, was now Sterling Industries' Chief Innovation Officer, but he had insisted on an unconventional arrangement. He spent 2 days each week in the executive offices working on strategic initiatives, and 3 days moving through different departments, talking with employees at every level, and identifying new opportunities for improvement. Janet Morrison had become one of his strongest advocates. The experience of nearly dismissing valuable talent because of her own prejudices had fundamentally changed her leadership approach. She now made it a point to engage with employees across all levels of the organization, and her management style had evolved from authoritarian to collaborative. You know what's ironic? Janet said during one of their weekly strategy meetings. The best business advice I've received in my career came from someone I almost ignored completely. Marcus was reviewing employee feedback forms from the latest perspective program session. That's not ironic, that's human nature. We all make assumptions about where value comes from, The key is staying open to being surprised. The success at Sterling Industries hadn't gone unnoticed in the business community. Other companies began reaching out to Marcus, wanting to understand how to implement similar culture transformation initiatives. He had received job offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies, each offering significantly more money than his current position. But Marcus had discovered something more valuable than a higher salary. He had found work that aligned with his values and utilized his skills in meaningful ways. The combination of strategic thinking and human connection that had been missing from his previous consulting career was now the foundation of everything he did. The morning news crew was setting up in Sterling Industries' lobby for a live interview about the company's remarkable turnaround. Richard Sterling would be discussing their success story with the business reporter, but he had insisted that Marcus join him for the interview. "Are you nervous about being on television?" Richard asked as they waited for the cameras to be ready. Marcus adjusted his tie. He now wore business suits every day, though he kept a pair of comfortable walking shoes under his desk for his rounds through the building. "Not nervous exactly, but I want to make sure we get the message right, which is that innovation isn't about hiring smarter people or spending more money on research. It's about creating an environment where good ideas can emerge from anywhere and be taken seriously, regardless of their source." The reporter, Sandra Mitchell from Financial News Network, approached them with her crew. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to this interview. Our viewers are fascinated by Sterling Industries' transformation story. Let's start with the basics. How did you discover that your delivery person was actually a management consultant?" Richard smiled. "We almost didn't. Mr. Chen approached our COO with ideas for improvement, and she initially dismissed him because of his job title. It was only after we noticed company-wide improvements that couldn't be explained that we realized we had been overlooking exceptional talent." Sandra turned to Marcus. "Mr. Chen, what motivated you to offer business advice while working as a delivery person? That's certainly unusual." "I saw problems I knew how to solve," Marcus replied simply. "When you have relevant experience and skills, staying silent about opportunities for improvement feels wasteful both for yourself and for the organization. But you could have applied for a consulting position through traditional channels." Marcus paused thoughtfully. "Traditional hiring processes focus on credentials and experience, which are important, but they often miss practical wisdom and fresh perspectives. Some of the best insights I provided came specifically from seeing Sterling Industries through the lens of someone who wasn't part of the corporate hierarchy." Sandra's follow-up question was direct. "Do you think other companies are missing talent because of similar blind spots?" "Absolutely," Marcus said without hesitation. "Every organization has people whose potential is underutilized because their current role doesn't reflect their full capabilities. The companies that figure out how to identify and develop that hidden talent will have significant competitive advantages." Richard Sterling added, "We've implemented programs specifically designed to surface ideas and insights from employees at every level. The return on investment has been remarkable, but more importantly, it's created a culture where people feel valued and heard." After the interview concluded and the news crew packed up their equipment, Marcus returned to his office to find a handwritten note on his desk. It was from Sarah, the receptionist who had always been friendly to him during his delivery days. "Thank you for showing all of us that our ideas matter," the note read. "Because of your example, I submitted a proposal for improving our visitor check-in process. Mr. Sterling approved it, and I've been promoted to administrative coordinator. You changed more than just our company. You changed how we see ourselves." That afternoon, Marcus made his usual rounds through the building, but now his visit served a different purpose. Instead of delivering food, he was meeting with employee innovation teams, reviewing suggestion submissions, and identifying the next generation of unexpected contributors. In the marketing department, he stopped to chat with a new intern who had proposed an interesting social media strategy. In accounting, he reviewed a cost-saving idea from a recently hired bookkeeper. In the loading dock, he discussed logistics improvements with the shipping manager, who had started as a part-time warehouse worker. As he walked through the building that had once made him feel invisible, Marcus reflected on how dramatically both his life and Sterling Industries had changed. The company's success wasn't just about implementing his recommendations. It was about creating a culture where every person's potential could be recognized and developed. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Saw you on the news this morning. Mom and Dad would be proud. You found a way to make business about people again." That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the office, he encountered a young woman in the lobby wearing a food delivery uniform. She was studying the employee suggestion box that Sterling Industries had installed near the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said, approaching him hesitantly. "I deliver lunch orders here sometimes, and I've noticed some inefficiencies in how orders are distributed to different floors. Do you think anyone would be interested in hearing suggestions from someone like me?" Marcus smiled, remembering his own nervous approach to Janet Morrison's office months earlier. "I think you'd be surprised how interested they would be. In fact, let me introduce you to our COO. She's made it her priority to hear good ideas regardless of where they come from." As he walked the young woman toward the elevator, Marcus realized that Sterling Industries' greatest transformation wasn't visible in their profit margins or efficiency metrics. It was evident in the simple fact that a delivery person now felt comfortable approaching the company with ideas for improvement. The invisible had become visible, and in doing so, they had helped everyone else see more clearly too.